So, let's talk about one of the biggest challenges in enterprise AI. I mean, you've got these incredibly powerful models, right? But how do you make them smart about your business, your own private, totally up to the minute company data? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to tackle today. See, this is the heart of the problem. That amazing cutting-edge AI, it learned everything it knows from the public internet. It has no idea what your latest sales figures are, or your internal HR policies, or that secret project you've been working on. It's super powerful, but it's basically an outsider. So the real question is, how do we bring it into the loop? And this right here is what the industry calls the knowledge gap. And believe me, it is the critical hurdle for any company that's trying to get real, tangible value out of generative AI. Just think about it for a second. For an AI to actually be useful, to help your team or your customers with specific questions, it needs your company's data. Otherwise, all you're going to get are generic textbook answers. And let's be honest, that's not really what anyone's looking for. Okay, so how have developers been dealing with this so far? Well, traditionally, they've had to roll up their sleeves and build a solution completely from scratch. Let's take a look at what it takes to do it the hard way. The main technique everyone uses to solve this is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG for short. And honestly, the name is a perfect description of what it does. You retrieve your company's data to augment or enrich the AI's prompt. This gives it the exact context it needs to generate a much more relevant answer. But, and this is a big but, as the folks over at LangChain point out, this is not exactly a simple plug-and-play solution. Building it yourself involves, and I'm quoting here, several cumbersome steps that can be really time-consuming. So what makes it so cumbersome? Well, it's this entire pipeline you have to build and then maintain yourself. You're responsible for literally everything. First, you've got to ingest the data. Then, you have to figure out the best way to chunk it into meaningful pieces. After that, you've got to convert those chunks into these numerical things called embeddings, so a machine can actually understand their meaning. Then, you have to set up and manage a whole specialized vector database just to search through all that stuff efficiently. And on top of all that, you have to write all the custom code to stitch these moving parts together. The bottom line is, this is not a trivial task. We're talking about a major engineering project with a whole lot of moving parts that you have to keep running, scaling, and maintaining. And this is where things start to get really interesting. What if you could get all the power of RAG, but without having to manage all of that mind-numbing complexity? And that brings us to the solution we're focusing on today, knowledge bases for Amazon Bedrock. This is AWS's fully managed answer to this exact problem.
What AWS has done here is, well, they've basically packaged that entire complex, messy workflow into a single managed service. Knowledge Bases handles everything, from the moment your data comes in to the moment the AI spits out a response. It just hides all that complicated stuff under the hood. It pretty much automates away all those cumbersome steps we just talked about. You just point the service to your data living in an S3 bucket, and it takes over from there. It does the fetching, the chunking, creating the embeddings, storing them, and, maybe most importantly, it keeps everything synchronized. So as your documents get updated, your AI stays totally up to date. Okay, let's dive in a little deeper here, because there's a lot of power and flexibility you get with this managed service. So you basically have two main ways to use it. First, there's the RetrieveAndGenerate API. You can think of this as the easy button. It does everything for you in just one call. But then you have the Retrieve API. This one just fetches the relevant data and hands it back to you. This gives you way more flexibility to build your own custom workflows on top of it, maybe with a framework like LangChain, for example. And don't think for a second this is just some basic tool. Oh no, it is packed with serious enterprise-grade features. It can understand not just text, but also tables and even images inside your documents. It gives you really sophisticated options for how you want to chunk your data to get the best results. It even uses advanced techniques like GraphRag to better understand relationships in your information. And on top of all that, it's got guardrails built right in to help you make sure your AI is behaving responsibly. You know, one of the most critical features for any enterprise AI is trust. And that's where source attribution comes in. To help stop the AI from just making stuff up or hallucinating, every single answer is backed up with citations, tracing the information right back to the original source document. You can even see the original image if that's where the data came from. This is absolutely huge for verification and for building user confidence. So all of this brings us to the big question, right? When should you use a managed service like this?
And when should you actually go through the trouble of building your own custom RAG solution? Now, it's really important to acknowledge the real-world trade-offs. As this one developer on Reddit pointed out, while the retrieval quality was great, they felt like the performance was a bit slow compared to their own highly customized setup. It's that classic trade-off, you know? Convenience versus total control. So how does AWS itself recommend you think about this? Well, they actually provide a really clear step-by-step framework. Their advice is to start with the simplest, most out-of-the-box solution, which is Amazon Q Business. If that's not quite right for what you need, then you step up to knowledge bases for Bedrock. Building a completely custom solution, well, they position that as the last resort, something you only do when you have very specific needs for control or have to integrate components that aren't supported out of the box. At the end of the day, the choice really boils down to this core trade-off. The managed approach with knowledge bases is all about speed and simplicity. The custom RAG approach is for when you absolutely need maximum flexibility and you're willing to take on the significant engineering and operational headache that comes with it. And this really leads to a much bigger question for the future of AI development. As these powerful managed services get better and better, are we moving past the era of everyone building their own homegrown RAG pipeline? Is a fully managed approach becoming the new standard for enterprise AI? It's definitely something to keep an eye on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.